Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. This time out, our special guest, Marcus Ryle from Line 6.
How are you,
Thanks for coming in. Good to see you, my friend.
My pleasure. Good to see you, too.
So you're here for a quick visit to Sweetwater.
Yeah, happy to come out and preview some of the new secret stuff that we can't talk about quite yet.
We won't say anything about anything.
But some fun, exciting stuff coming up for NAMM.
So it's going to be a big NAMM show for you guys?
Yeah, it's going to be a great show.
Awesome. So people, I'm sure, will know who you are. You've designed some of the really game-changing products that we all use every day in our music-making stuff. But let's take a step back. How did you get started with this whole thing?
Well, you mean like music and technology in the first place?
Yeah,
where it all really began?
Your father designed the computer systems for a Saturn V, is that right?
You are correct. You've done your homework.
That's crazy.
I feel really fortunate. My dad had a real technical background and had his history. There were professors and a lot of intellectuals. My mom came from a very musical family, so I feel like I really got the lucky gene pool, the perfect mix of the two of them. And used to jokingly refer to my dad as the rocket scientist. So it was the rocket scientist and the musician getting together. But he was mainly a pioneer in the computer industry. So I got exposed to technology really early on. He always encouraged me to play with things, and he brought home an Apple II computer when it first came out. So I started programming when I was quite young, and soldering and playing with things. And of course I started with piano lessons at age 7, studied classical music for about 10 years, but quickly discovered rock and roll and figured I would just be a rock and roll star.
Right.
As many of us start out doing. But because of the technology background, I very early on got into synthesizers and started taking things apart. And I always say it's great motivation to learn technology when you take something apart that you've saved all your money to buy, and then it no longer works. Right. So I had an ARP Odyssey was my first synthesizer, an old white-faced ARP Odyssey I'd bought used and taken it apart, and things weren't working quite right again. So that's when I started my real schoolwork in electronics to learn that stuff. So this is really a classic story of a hobby that turned into a career. It's really all I've been doing, and all I know is music and technology since early teens. Right.
We left high school at 16, went to college.
Yeah.
And were you studying engineering at that point, or software?
Well,
what were you looking at?
I didn't quite fit in high school, so I did leave at 16, and my mom actually found there was a California State University in Carson called Cal State Dominguez Hills that was about a half hour from our house, that they had just put in a new recording studio. So I really wasn't sure whether school was for me, quite honestly, at the time.
Right.
Being that I was going to be a rock star, of course. But I saw this brand new studio with a 2-inch 16-track and a bunch of old synthesizers, well, new synthesizers at the time.
At the time, right.
ARP 2600s and EMU modulars, and I decided, this is someplace I could hang out. So I took classes that interested me, and that did help me out a lot. Just physics and programming and electronics and digital logic, and ended up. Because they'd had this new studio, they didn't really have much of a staff at the time. So before long, I was teaching classes because I had done a lot of work with synthesizers and recording. And a few years into that, Tom Oberheim came to guest lecture at the university. And I got to meet Tom, and he offered me a job. So I was 19, and he said, "Why don't you come design synthesizers?" And so I thought, why not?
So you started at Oberheim.
And
what were some of the products you worked on there?
First one was the DSX. So I started in 1980, and so this is before MIDI and before computers and music and so on.
Right.
And really wanted to be able to have a way to record music in real time and do multi-track type recording, but be able to actually have the synthesizers play the notes. I mean, what we all commonly know of as MIDI sequencing today, but it didn't really exist back then. There were some step sequencers and, of course, analog sequencers before then. So the DSX hooked up to at the time, the OBX and OBXA, and then the OB8 through a 37-pin cable. It was a parallel digital bus, and you could play on the keyboard and quantize what you recorded, loop, create multiple tracks and parts. So that was really my first project at Oberheim, and it was kind of the heart of the Oberheim system, which was the first time a drum machine and a sequencer and synthesizer all connected together and could be synchronized together.
Which was very cool.
So,
very cool.
Yeah, it was good times.
So at that time, Dave Smith and Nikitaro Takahashi from Roland were putting together the MIDI spec. What was your impression of that when that whole thing kind of came together?
It's kind of fun, and since I got to be at ground zero, actually, Dave had, if you remember, he did the Prophet 10, and he decided, we had our sequencer as a separate hardware piece, and then he did the Prophet 10, he built a little sequencer into the bottom left side. I don't know if you remember this. It was basically, it would just record what notes you played, and he'd created kind of a serial interface inside the machine, because he realized, you know, the microprocessor needed to know what notes were played and remember when they were played. So he had the bright idea of having this be something that could be a standard, and he was going to do a paper at AES. So he came down to Oberheim. This would be, I guess it was middle of '81 or so, and he and I met to talk about it. He called it USI at the time, Universal Synthesizer Interface, which ended up being a name that was taken. But we ended up discussing it, and I think shows how different times were. I think he made some comment like, you know, if Sequential Circuits in Oberheim does this, well, everyone's going to have to do it. It was back in the day when American synthesizer companies were kind of
they were dominant at that point, yeah.
So the two of us went over to Japan in October that year and met with some of the key representatives of the major Japanese companies and discussed the proposal, and we argued quite a bit about whether the speed would be fast enough and what the connector should be and so on.
Right.
And that is when Roland and Mr. Takahashi got pretty heavily involved, and very quickly between him and Dave they hammered out what became the final spec.
Right.
So I thought it was great. I have to be honest, I was concerned that it was not going to be fast enough. We'd already had quite a bit of experience with sequencing and even using a parallel interface, and understood the challenges that latency had. So Oberheim was viewed by some as kind of being late to the party, because it was a full year before we had MIDI on our products.
Right.
But I'm happy we got there.
Yeah, exactly. You got there, it all worked out.
Yeah.
So that's great. So around '85, you founded your own company, Fast Forward Designs. And what was the idea there?
It was pretty simple. I'd been at Oberheim almost 5 years, and it was, the best school I could have. We got to have a great time designing great synthesizers and the like. But I had interest in a lot of additional types of products that might have been beyond what Oberheim was doing. And there was another engineer there, Michel Douadic, who'd been there. He started probably only 4 or 5 months after I did in 1980.
Okay.
He was working at a music store as a repairman in France, and was going to come over. He'd been doing modifications to Oberheim since. He was going to come over for 6 months, and he ended up never leaving. And
nice.
We had a great time designing products at Oberheim, and we thought, if we started our own company as design consultants, if we could make a living doing what we love, but be able to design a lot more types of products, that seemed like it'd be a great idea. So Fast Forward Designs was born. My wife, Susan Wolf, handled all of the non-engineering stuff, found our first building, in fact, named the company, and did all the business side of things, while Michelle and I started making products. Our first client was Dynacord. We got hired by them within our first week, and it's a German company. We designed a digital drum brain for them for a digital drum set in 1985. So,
right, incredible. Yeah. So how do you start a company like that, and do you just call Digidesign up as another of your clients and say, hey, we'll design products for you?
Well, it just felt at the time, I think, as a much smaller industry. I mean, it still feels like a fairly small family, this industry, but at the time, it was surprisingly easy, or we were just very lucky. We decided I left Oberheim in April of '85, and my phone was ringing right away. And there were, again, because it was a small industry, there were a couple guys who had worked at Oberheim previously who were distributing Dynacord in the U.S. They found out that we left, and they asked if they could make an introduction. And people from Dynacord happened to be in Los Angeles that week. And we met. They said what they wanted us to make. We said we can do it. And then we decided we had to go figure out how to do it. And, and away we went.
Right.
And then, you know, met Keith Barr at an industry party. Keith Barr, one of the founders of Elesis.
Right.
And he heard about us and some of the things we did and wanted to know if we wanted to design some products for Elesis. Peter Gocher, founder of Digidesign. Digidesign was originally called Digidrums. And I actually met him originally while I was still at Oberheim because his company, he and Evan Brooks, were making replacement drum chips for the DMX drum machine at Oberheim and for the EMU drum machine and the Linn drum machine. So he obviously, they changed the name to Digidesign and went on to build a great company. And when he saw that we were doing consulting, he was interested in us doing some products for them as well. So we ended up growing pretty quickly. We ended up about 11 people before too long, all engineers except for Susan, and just designing products for a lot of companies.
Right, right. So you did the sample cell.
So yeah, for Digidesign, the whole sample cell series of products.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Which were amazing at the time. That was incredible to have a sampler right in your computer. It was
Yeah,
it was really
that was
very
fun.
cool.
What I remember is I think you could max it out at 32 megabytes of RAM, and it cost about $1,000 just for the memory.
Which was huge, though.
Yeah, that was huge at the
in those
time.
days. Yeah. And certainly a long string of incredible products for Elesis. Was the first? Was it the HR16 and the MMT8? Were those the first two that you did for them?
Yeah, it's funny. It's an interesting echo of the Oberheim system when you think about it. The Oberheim system, the DMX and DSX, a drum machine and sequencer.
Right.
With the OB8, you know, that system cost about $10,000 in 1982 dollars.
Right.
To get 8 voices of synthesizer and a little 8-bit drum machine and so on. And Keith Barr was really amazing at being able to make things, you know, really low cost, and, you know, the whole notion of the democratization of music making. I think he was a real pioneer in that. And he knew he could make hardware quite inexpensively and was designing a custom chip for a drum machine. So asked if we would do the software and the specifications. So I was able to kind of reinvent where sequencers and drum machines could go. And I think the 2 of those boxes, not counting whatever MIDI synths you had, sold for around $800 for
It was
the
like
2
$449 list, I think, on each of those products.
$299
Yeah,
for
something like that.
the sequencer. So that was the start, and then we got into doing effects with them, like the Quadriverb and the Quadriverb 2, and of course the ADAT.
The ADAT was the big thing, right?
The biggest project. It was a real exciting project to work on.
So where did the idea for that come from?
Well, Keith originated the idea. That's one of the things that I value that I learned from him is there's a level of audacity you need to have to do something that bold. And at that time, for me, I was very into designing and making products, but it really seemed audacious to imagine that we could design a digital tape recorder, given, you know, giants like Sony. And others were in that field. You know, I mean, remember a digital multi-track tape recorder cost $100,000 or more at the time. And Keith just had always wanted to do a tape recorder, so we started looking at different formats. You know, even looking at cassettes and all kinds of things, and think about how we could pack bits in. And Keith made the decision that VHS was the way to go, and I still have my original drawings of drawn up the first panels and how the user interface would work. And you know, one of the things I'm proud of that is, I think, part of the ADAT success was when you do something that's such a totally new technology, being able to make it so that it is still familiar to operate, I think is really important. And so there were really only 2 new buttons on an ADAT. If you'd ever used a Fostex or Tascam 8-track, everything was familiar.
Very familiar.
You just didn't see the reels going around anymore.
Right.
But you had this format button and digital in. These were the 2 new things you had to learn. But suddenly everyone at home could have, you know, digital quality audio.
Right.
And that was something I'd always dreamed of. And
Oh, yeah.
a lot of other people did too.
Compared to what you could get at the time, I mean, like you say, really to get even close to pro quality was the half-inch Tascam,
Right.
you know, the 1-inch Tascam.
Yeah, if you really knew what you were doing, you could get decent results. But pretty much it was, what you did at home was demos, and then you went into a real studio to make real recordings. So that, it started a whole revolution, you know, again, this whole democratization of music making, that people could actually afford to have gear that could produce quality, so that now, you know, you were no longer limited by what you had, what you owned. You know, you're just limited by your musical ability, which can be scary for some people as well.
But you can't sell that.
You know, no, that we can't help you with that. But at least, you know, just being able to capture, actually capture authentically what your performance is without the tape hiss and without all the problems that existed before. It was
a big deal.
Times.
It was $39.95. I remember when that came out.
Yeah, for 8 tracks.
Amazing to get that.
$500 a track, and you could you could go up to 128 tracks if you wanted to.
Yeah, it was a very cool system. So you ended up doing about 40 products for Elesis by the time you were done, right?
That's right.
You did keyboards and
keyboards. Yeah, the Quadrasynth, the whole QS series of products we did as well. It was a good time. It was a great team of people there, and it was really it was good fun.
Right. So Fast Forward Designs then morphed into this new company, Line 6.
Yeah.
So how did that all happen?
Well, it started out really as a research project. If you think, you know, there is this thread of through my career and the folks that have worked at Fast Forward and Line 6 of just trying to find ways to use technology to enable creativity, to enable musicians and so on. And so if you think about the mid-90s now, keyboards had really evolved in a tremendous way. Plugins were happening. If you were a recording engineer or producer or a keyboard player, you felt like you had just all the best toys, right? Push a button, you could get anything you wanted.
Right.
And what was going on with the guitar player? You know, if you had a guitar player in the studio or live, if you said, gee, I'm looking for this type of sound or that type of sound, you know, if they even had the right gear, it could take, you know, hours just to get things set up to get the right sound. Because everything was analog still at the time. Everything was manually patched together.
Right.
And we saw, you know, one of the biggest challenges, of course, is if you really wanted a wide range of amp sounds, you had to have quite an amp collection and then be able to haul them wherever you're going to go and so on.
Right.
And that just seemed like a real limitation, and we basically just started a research project that we decided to do just on our own. We weren't sure where it might go, so we kept it a secret and just started analyzing tube amps. And it was really a technical exercise where DSP's powerful enough now that we could actually create software models of what a tube amp does.
Right.
And that research went on for quite some time, and then we realized that we really had something here, and decided that this is something we should do on our own and our own brand.
Right.
And that's how Line 6 was born.
So did you pretty much just say, okay, we're done designing for other people, now we're just going to do this?
It kind of seems that way looking back, but actually there was a fair amount of overlap. I mean, we launched Line 6, and part of the reason it has its own name is Fast Forward Designs was still the name of the company. So it was kind of our own brand, a house brand, you could say. And we launched that in 1996. We still did some consulting, but I'd say over the next few years, we kind of weaned it down and explained to our clients that this was clearly taking up the lion's share of our time, and ultimately we wanted to focus exclusively on these products and evolving the technology for guitar players.
Is it true the name of the company came from the telephone system at Fast Forward Designs?
Yes.
Is that right? What was the story?
It was, the name didn't originally intend to be the company name. It was simply, we had 5 phone lines at Fast Forward Designs. Now, so Line 6 didn't exist. So it actually started out as a code name because when we were doing all this early research, you'd have to, if you had an old Marshall, you had to crank it up if you wanted to get it distorting.
Right.
So we'd have guitar amps blasting in our offices, and we realized that would seem rather strange if any of our clients were to come and visit. So if someone from another company was coming in, the receptionist would get on the PA and page one of us, tell us that we had a call in Line 6, which was code to turn the amps off and put stuff away. So then, of course, once all the research was done, we had to come up with a company name, I actually only had 2 requirements. I wanted something that was 2 syllables and that the name didn't define who we were. And there are a lot of great companies like Apple and Sony and Roland that were just, that the names in and of themselves don't actually mean anything.
Right.
What the company does is what gives the brand meaning. You know, we found naming a company is like naming a band. It can be really hard sometimes. We went through 50 names or so trying to come up with the right thing until my wife finally said, well, so why not Line 6? And it fit the criteria perfectly.
Yeah,
so
it works.
It stuck.
That's great.
Yeah.
So the first products were guitar amps.
Yeah.
Was it the Flex that came out first, or was it the Axis?
The Axis 212.
The Axis 212 was the first one?
The first one. First
Right.
modeling amp, and world's first modeling amp. We got a patent on the concept, and that shipped in end of August 1996.
Right.
That was the start.
Which was a big revelation. And then followed that up shortly after with the Pod, the very first Pod.
Yeah, Pod came out in '98, and that's probably where most people really became familiar with Line 6. We actually sold almost 20,000 of the first generation of amps, so it was pretty well received for a new, unknown company.
Right.
But Pod definitely is what put us on the map. I mean, we really hit a nerve because you think about enabling technology. For many guitar players, they didn't necessarily need another guitar amp. I mean, some really valued the flexibility. And of course, it's changed how amplifiers exist today.
Right.
But if you already had a guitar amp, you know, that you were happy with, you don't necessarily need a new one. But everyone could relate to the challenges of recording your guitar amp.
Right.
And you know, not only was there additional technical skill and gear required, but for many people, you just didn't even have the environment. I mean, if you lived in an apartment, you're trying to record, you know, and you want to crank up your Marshall or your Mesa Boogie, you're in trouble, right? So Pod really was a game changer that kind of went hand in hand to where things were going since the days of the ADAT, right? People wanted to be able to record at home. And now not only was there modeling of the amps and effects, but also the cabinet and the microphone and the room to have your complete signal path.
Right.
And that's been a real successful line for us. We've sold well over 1 million pods.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. Well, it continues today. I mean, you're still making
continues
pods
today because, you know, it's our job's never done
with
that stuff. I mean, that's what's great. Every time there's more processing power available thanks to the evolution of the computer industry, right? We get to make a more powerful box. We can discover more nuances in the modeling. And we've got a huge collection of classic amps at the office, so we can dig out an old, you know, wide panel deluxe or a, you know, AC30 and remeasure and recompare each time we do a new generation of modeling.
Right,
So,
right, and there's more and more processing power, so you can drive that,
exactly.
all those things, and make it even more and more accurate.
It's like, you think about it, it's like our first amp, you can kind of, I mean, it was revolutionary, but it was the best we could do with the technology at the time. It's kind of like the first digital cameras, right? It's like, what an awesome capability, but people would say, well, you can see the pixels, right? And it doesn't look as good as film and so on. Now, digital photography is advanced to the point where you don't, you know, we just don't even want any more megapixels, right? It's like, it can be too much. And that's kind of how modeling has evolved. We get more and more power so that now the nuance and detail is really incredible.
Right, right. So in addition to that aspect of it, just the resolution, if you will, aspect of it,
Yeah.
you guys have also really been on the cutting edge of things like Bluetooth control with the Amplify amps, and I just got the Amplify TT. I haven't even taken it out of the box yet. I just got that in. I can't wait to try that out. But you've really broken the doors open for allowing that remote control over that as well. What is it that keeps you interested in being on that cutting edge and not saying, you know what, it's good enough. We've got the Pod HD Maximus. You know, what is the?
There's, I don't know. It's just. You know, the possibilities are endless. So, you know, as technology evolves and new tools evolve, you know, suddenly we've all got these computers in our pockets that are more powerful than what took us to the moon, right? So, you know, as these things evolve, now we are able to create these new types of ecosystems. You know, who knows where things will go in the future, but I think, you know, as these types of products are just using technology to make our lives easier, and they should also be used to making music easier. Not necessarily the playing. Again, you know, if you got passionate about music, the playing is your job. But why should all the other aspects involved. If you just want to jam along, or if you want to record, or you're just looking for that special sound, taking advantage of new technologies like an Android phone or an Apple phone is a great way to give you more power and more flexibility.
Sure.
And more immediacy
Right.
to get in your tone.
Right. As you mentioned, Line 6 doesn't really define, it's not the Line 6 guitar amplifier company, it's Line 6. You've delved into other areas as well, the Variax guitar, which of course is complementary to the pod and the amplifiers. But a new venture, relatively new venture for you, is the PA system, the Stagescape and the Stage Source. Where did that come from?
Oh, it's it's all still the same core foundation, right? How do we enable musicians? It's I experienced it. You maybe did as well. In gigging days, so often the musicians end up being responsible for their own sound. Not that many bands can regularly take a sound person with them or rent a full PA and so on.
Right.
And those often end up being the best gigs when you get them, right? When you don't have to worry about the sound, someone else is going to deal with it. You just worry about playing. Those are the great gigs. But for many musicians, those are few and far between.
Right.
And it seemed that the approach that everyone was going with live sound was about designing products for sound engineers, which is great. I mean, I'm a sound engineer as well, and I love all the gadgets that exist. But that forces every musician either to become an expert sound engineer if they want to sound good, or even if they do that, probably more importantly, is they have to be operating in their left and right brain at the same time.
Right.
Music making is a completely right brain experience, right? It's creative, you want to be in the moment, and you want to be able to just express yourself fully, be focused in that area. Whereas sound engineering, is very much left brain. It's analytical,
Sure.
thinking about what's the problem, what's going wrong, what do I need to do to fix things, and that takes you out of your creative space. So we wanted to build a system that would enable musicians to operate as deeply as they may want to if they're into sound engineering, but also be able to stay in that creative space by simplifying the process and having this whole concept of that we call visual mixing.
Right.
So it's been really gratifying. There's a number of bands I know that use this that have just been thrilled. They went from thinking they're done because they've plugged a mic in and sound came out,
Right.
which is frankly how a lot of bands end up having to run sound, either
Right.
because of lack of time or experience. The sound came out, therefore it works, to actually being able to have a nuanced and real high quality sound come out of their system without a whole lot of effort.
Right.
And the best compliment that I get from it is hearing from them how their audience members, the people who aren't even musicians or sound engineers, have come up to them and commented that the band's never sounded so good. They've never heard them that way before.
Right.
Which is
That's very
real
cool.
gratifying.
The system is so intelligent. All you have to do is connect a few cables and move some pictures around on the screen, and you've got a mix, and you're making it happen. So that's congratulations. Yeah, that's very, very cool.
Thanks.
So you can't tell us the secrets for NAMM, but anything you can tell us about what's coming up in the future?
More.
More. All right.
There's more to come. I think people will be pleased. There's despite doing the live sound and our digital wireless, which has done very well, and so on. Using technology to solve problems for a lot of different musicians. We still have a primary focus with guitar players. That was our start. And we've now got, we're up to 18 years or so of digital modeling experience. So
right.
We're kind of the old hands at it. So we've got some new gadgets that we'll be showing to just expand the choices for guitar players.
Nice.
And frankly, a lot more on the drawing board for even beyond then. We're never short of ideas, so
right.
It's a good problem to have.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Wow, that's very exciting to hear, though.
Yeah.
Cool stuff to look forward to. Thanks Marcus. Such
My
a pleasure
pleasure.
having you here. Thanks for taking the time to come and visit us. Can't wait for NAMM to see the new stuff. Well, the secrets we won't talk about, but the new stuff is, wow, it's cool.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Lots of great things. So thanks again for being here. We appreciate all you do.
My pleasure.
I'm Mitch Gallagher. Thanks for joining me for the Sweetwater Minute.